So people have a natural affinity for other animals. I say other animals because obviously we are animals as well. E.O. Wilson of Harvard University some time ago coined the phrase biophilia, which is the human affinity for nature. And often we see that played out in a lot of different ways. People have pets, and people go to zoos. They go into nature to enjoy nature and enjoy wildlife. And I want to talk to you today about the future of zoos. We're going to talk a little bit about the past as well, but there are millions of people who go now to zoos, actually about 200 million people every year in the U.S. There are also millions that don't go. So we know why you do go, and I think that we also know why some people don't go. And of course, there are also people who go and sometimes are a little unsure. And what they're really unsure about is whether or not the animals that are living in zoos are happy. And it's perfectly fine these days to say that term, to talk about being happy. It's no longer considered by the scientific community as ridiculous and anthropomorphic, because we now know that animals, other animals, just like us, have emotions and thoughts and feelings. So the question really is, can we get to a point where zoos are really sanctuaries, where zoo life for animals might even be better than it is for the wild? And we all know that life in the wild is no picnic. You're constantly challenged with predators, you're challenged with finding food, with finding water and shelter. So, in a way, I think that zoos are a bit of a window into how we think about other animals. And there's kind of a strange history. So I know you can't read the picture next to the picture of the chimpanzee. This is a guidebook from one of America's leading zoos of 100 years ago. What it says about gorillas is that when you hear that the zoo has acquired a gorilla, it's really important that you come immediately to see it, because they often die very quickly of sullenness and indigestion and other ailments. So 100 years ago, there really wasn't an ethical foundation. What we really saw was one species, humans, capturing thousands of other species, really for our curiosity. And, you know, nowadays you hear about the scientific work that goes on. I'm going to share a little bit about some of that in a moment. But there are these conflicting questions. Are zoos places of cruelty? Are they really prisons? Or are they really doing meaningful things that are helpful to the animals? Is it really about us, or is it really about other animals? And I'm hoping that when we talk about the future, that what we're really talking about is getting to a point where zoos are first and foremost known for their compassion. So what did people do before there were zoos? For hundreds of years, the people of London went to the Royal Bethlehem Hospital. And that's where the term Bedlam comes from. And what you would do is you would pay a little bit of money, and you were allowed to walk through the halls and look at all of the odd people that were crazy. And in fact, if you paid extra, they would let you give alcohol to those poor souls who were living there so that they'd be even more crazy. Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that when the Royal Bethlehem Hospital closed in London in the early 1800s, after operating for hundreds of years in this way, they closed to the public, the London Zoo opened, and the rest of the zoo world began to open as well. That's kind of a frightening thought, that really the origin of zoos was all about seeing odd things that people weren't familiar with, and not wondering whether or not they were having a decent life. So that's a long time ago, but we still today have some of that going on. I mean, obviously there are shows, I'm not sure you can see this, people standing on the nose of a killer whale. really hard to envision how that is good for the welfare of the killer whale or in any way educational. And even elephant shows and things like that. I mean, these are still with us today in this country and, of course, all over the world. So I guess the question that I'd like to dig into is whether or not zoos are really all about nature or whether it's a lot of nonsense and just a lot of talk. And whether or not we can get to a point where this collision of all of the wonderful things, the conservation, the welfare, the education, the collision with entertainment and the curiosity of humans to see other things, whether somehow that can come together and end up being a good thing, a thing that ensures animals have great welfare and indeed that humans also have a great experience. So the first starting point is you simply cannot say we do great conservation, and indeed there is great conservation done by zoos around the country, but it comes at the expense of the individuals that live in a zoo. So there must be a fabulous physical and social environment for the animals. It is no different for humans. If you have a wonderful home, a wonderful physical environment, but a terrible social life, you are unhappy. It is no different for animals. If you don't have significant choice and control over your life, remember when we were teenagers, when we were 17 and still living at home and our parents had control and we didn't, and how frustrating that was? Of course, it happens when we're older as well. Without choice and control, without great physical and social environments, we are not happy and other animals are not happy. So that has to be the starting point. And then there has to be meaningful conservation of animals and ecosystems, and we have to do a great job of helping people understand the relationship and how we can be better environmental citizens. So our job is to really affect people's attitudes and values so that they can also be doing good things. So how do we do that? I'll give you a couple of examples from our zoo, but this is found in many modern zoos, but much more of this needs to happen. This is the Arctic Ring of Life. It's the biggest still polar bear facility in the country. It's wonderful experience for people. It does not in any way upset the animals or challenge them. And it gives us an opportunity to talk about a polar environment. And you'll see a thread in this a little bit later on when we also talk about Antarctica, not just the Arctic. So there's an opportunity here to do conservation work, there's an opportunity to do education, and there's an opportunity for the animals to live in a fabulous place. They live in chilled seawater here. This is not something you normally see, and it's far more expensive than doing a freshwater pool or not freezing the water, but this is important for their welfare. The same thing with the Cotton Family Wolf Wilderness that we recently opened, and we did this for a number of reasons. One of them is we want to stop this ridiculous notion of the big bad wolf, which is affecting, frankly, it's affecting politics and public policy. The idea that people are in Michigan and elsewhere in this country shooting wolves. You probably don't know this, but in the past 100 years in the United States, 2 people have been killed by wolves. This is our friend, not our enemy. This is man's best friend. So we think the future is build wonderful places for the animals to live and then help the public understand what's the real story instead of the fairy tale stories. The other part that's critical about moving forward is we need to stop just doing the charismatic megavertebrates. You know, the gorillas, the elephants, and I'll talk about elephants in a little while. We need to really help nature, and nature happens with all the creepy crawly things. No disrespect to major conservation organizations that are focused on giant pandas, but the reality is while giant pandas are important to us for aesthetics, they're one of the few species on the planet that if they disappear, nothing happens. Unlike so many other species where if they disappear, an ecosystem unravels in both directions, there'd be a little more bamboo in the world. I'm obviously not advocating that we ignore trying to save giant pandas, but we need to really think about this carefully, and where are we spending millions of dollars? People thought we were nuts when we did this 15 years ago, spending almost $10 million, and we now work on 100 species. I think it's about 1,000 animals at our facility, and we're breeding and reintroducing very, very endangered amphibians all over the world. It also happens not just through seeing animals, but also programmatically and through technology, and I'll talk about the technology in a minute. But the Academy for Humane Education and the Humane Science Lab, where we teach teachers and students how to teach and learn about nature and about animals without harming the things that we're trying to learn about. How many people, when they were students, had to dissect a frog, and how many of those people had any intention of ever becoming a veterinarian or anything related to that? Millions and millions of animals killed for no good reason. You can do all of this teaching with models, with simulations, and so there is a fundamental ethical dimension here that we need to rethink, and we need to remember that we're having a huge impact in so many different ways on the environment. I'm happy to say that we just won the 2015 Green Award for the most sustainable, the greenest zoo in the United States. And in fact, thank you. We have upstairs, for people that want it, a guide called Shades of Green. You can put this in your wallet, and there are all sorts of tips and ideas just about our daily lives, how to be less impactful, how to have a smaller ecological footprint. And we do it through technology. This is Science on a Sphere. I'm sorry that I don't have the video of this because this is really cool stuff. But explaining climate change to people, and that's only one of the things that Science on a Sphere does, is incredibly challenging until you actually see it. And this experience is like seeing Earth from about 2,000 miles away, and it's rotating, and we can show, and we do show over the course of 100 years, what's happened to sea ice. When you see that in the course of a minute or two, I don't think anybody can argue that climate change is happening and global warming is happening. There is no argument about that. There are people who deny it, but there's no argument about it. It's a fact. And we help people see that. The other thing that we're trying to do, and I mentioned this a little bit about the amphibians, but we're trying to get across this notion, relates back to the giant panda too, that conservation should not be a beauty contest. And although I happen to think the Partula snail that you see here on the right is quite beautiful, we saved the last 25, 30 years ago. There were only 25 left on the planet. And now, and since then have dispersed them to other zoological institutions, and now have begun to reintroduce them back into safe areas in the wild. That is a major success. It's not something that grabs the headlines, but this is something we need to do. You also see a turtle there that has a radio tracking device on it. Do you know that we have been studying turtles, and our staff has learned and documented that turtles have personality, each one of them. Now, the first time you hear that, it's kind of surprising, but then if you think about it, you go, well, why would that not be the case? Why do we think we are so different than the rest of the animal kingdom? We also do it through art, trying to get people to reflect and think about the relationship that we have with nature and animals, all sorts of different cultures. And you saw early on a bullet elephant, which is in this gallery. And that was really important because that was a major piece of our compassion, the decision to not continue to keep elephants, to basically say, unless an animal can thrive in our environment, in our region, whether it's climate or space or social dynamics, we shouldn't do it. The only thing we should do is have animals that can thrive in our environment. We also use some interesting technology to help people think about what life is like for other animals. It's hard enough to put yourself in the shoes of another human. It's really hard for people to think about what it's like to be a frog or to be an owl. This is a motion-based cabin, and it's all about experiencing the world through the eyes of animals. It's very, very cool, and it's very transformational. I know you can't read all of this. I just wanted to share with you that the key also to conservation is collaboration. It's the key to welfare as well. You'll notice here just a small handful of partners that we work with on lots of issues. PETA is one of them. If people who work in zoos and aquariums don't define themselves as people for the ethical treatment of animals, who would? So we don't view them as the enemy, we view them as partners. This is some of the work that we're doing with partners in the Congo. We are rescuing orphaned Grauer's gorillas. None of you have heard of Grauer's gorillas, you've only heard of mountain gorillas. It's very remote, it's a very dangerous area, but this is a really important initiative that's all connected to local communities and helping them advance conservation and welfare of animals and education. These are some of the milestones. What I really want to point out, though, are a couple of the stories of these animals that you see. A small number of the animals that we've rescued over time. Lions that came from a junkyard in Kansas. Lions that came from a crack house in Detroit. Bearla, the polar bear that was on tour in Puerto Rico, part of a Mexican circus. Can you imagine what life is like for a polar bear living in an environment that's normally at least 100 degrees warmer than it normally would be? An ex-racehorse, so that we can explain to people what our obligations are about racehorses. You know that 50% of racehorses are destroyed every year. Once they stop winning, they're destroyed. This is something which society doesn't know, and it's something that we need to talk about. We created a Center for Animal Welfare. We're not just talking to the public, we're training staff from zoos all over the world. Here they're learning what it's like to be a warthog. And here's some of the science that we're doing. These are penguins. And we're exploring new technologies that help us understand when animals are stressed or unhappy. So this is the future, the last thing I want to share with you. This is a place that allows us to talk about climate change because it's all about Antarctica. And it's going to be by far the biggest and most unique place in the world for penguins. And it's going to be an extraordinary experience for you where you actually don't have to go to Antarctica, where sometimes it's minus 120 degrees with 200-mile-an-hour winds. So thank you, and I hope you'll help us move the zoo community forward in a more ethical determination. Thank you.